What is going on, folks? It is Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X Layer to provide you my deep and insightful thoughts into the latest Marvel Cinematic Universe film, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Can you believe it? Third Guardians film. What is this? The sixth appearance of the Guardians? We had Guardians 1, Guardians 2, we had Infinity War, we had Endgame, we had the Christmas special, and now Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Poof, my mind is blown. Who would have thought way back when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 came out that it would last? I mean, it was a big experiment by Marvel. They were using characters that weren't really known. Even comic fans like myself were like, huh? Who? Guardians? What? I knew that they existed, but I didn't care about them as characters because, like, they never really interested me. But then the movie came out and it just kind of blew everybody away, right? Like, it had a certain flavor. It had that James Gunn flavor, right? That is something special that kind of sets it apart from everything else. I think that the James Gunn perspective is a unique one, and it's one that's always worth indulging in. It was worth indulging in these films. It was worth indulging in the Suicide Squad, in Peacemaker, and hopefully in the forthcoming, holy shit, ready for this? Superman Legacy. So James Gunn is jumping ship from the Marvel side to the DC side to run the freaking ship and hopefully set it right finally. Hopefully get us that DC universe that we've all been yearning for, right? Something that really accurately represents the full potential of that universe. And so it's a bittersweet moment, this movie, this Guardians Volume 3, because I'm very aware that, okay, so this is James Gunn's, like, swan song when it comes to Marvel. It's doubtful he'll ever return to Marvel. So, like, this is pretty much it. I mean, he had a great run. He brought a lot of flavor. He did a lot, and this movie is very intentionally like his final sort of goodbye to this world that he's created and these characters he created, and it's kind of like for me, it landed in a very sort of odd way where because it feels like so many different things. It feels like Rocket's story, which, you know, we needed. Like, we all were wondering, like, what? Rocket Raccoon? Who? What? Like, where'd he come from? What's his origin? Like, how did he come to be? Is he a raccoon? You know? We got that answer in this movie. And it's also, like, supposed to tie up the Guardian story, but did it tie up the Guardian story? Like, okay, first of all, this video is going to have spoilers galore, so if you haven't seen the movie, do not watch this video, because I'm going to be openly talking about spoilers and everything to do with the movie, the storyline, etc., etc. So put this video aside, come back to it when you have watched it, because I don't want to ruin it for you, because you deserve to enjoy it. Like every geek that, or even just the average moviegoer that enjoys these films, you deserve to enjoy that. So make sure you do that, and then come back here and watch this video, because I'm going to be talking about Guardians for a bit. Who knows how long? We'll see. It's late. It's about 11:13. The movie started at 7:45. It was a 3-hour experience. I left the theater about 10:45. It was a long story. Anyway, Rocket's story. Wrapping up the Guardians, but did it wrap up the Guardians? I mean, it sort of set up a new team. Nobody died, right? Like, nobody died. So everybody's still around. We saw Peter at the end. It tied up his story to an extent, or did it? Or did it just kind of place him on Earth where, like, Phase 2 needed him, right? Maybe. Like, now he's on Earth, right? So, like, that's very accessible to, like, every other thing that's going to happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe phase. Well, this is Phase 6. I meant, sorry, the second saga, the multiverse saga. So it sort of tied up his story because it started with him getting abducted and then it ends with him returning home to his grandfather. I mean, it did tie it up, but then at the very end, it's like, oh, the legendary Star-Lord will return. It's like, okay, well, the story's not tied up then with him. Mantis leaves, but did she really leave? I mean, she's out there somewhere. She's around. Drax and Nebula are staying on Nowhere, and they are basically taking care of Nowhere. Okay. So their stories are tied up, but are they? You have James Gunn's brother, one of the Ravengers, sort of his story kind of taking its kind of arc from, you know, not being able to use the psychic arrow or whatever it is, to being able to use it. Okay, but he's still around. Gamora was an interesting aspect for me in this film. She felt very much like a sort of side character. I honestly believed that in this film we were sort of going to get a way to kind of bring Gamora back, you know, like sort of kind of maybe in a way the High Evolutionary could somehow, you know, kind of extract like memories from the multiverse. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just coming up with things on the fly. I thought maybe that somehow she would sort of regain the memories of the dead Gamora, and that would sort of allow Peter and her to be together. But that didn't happen. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I felt like it felt fine in terms of like, well, there's a lot going on in this movie and that didn't necessarily need to happen. But if this is indeed the end of the trilogy of the Guardians films that James Gunn crafted and sort of the arcs that he set forth with his characters, then that sort of felt like the logical next step to what should happen with Peter and Gamora for them to get back together. But I like the idea they didn't get back together because that means that actual Gamora is dead and there's no getting her back. I mean, there were signs that this Gamora was sort of starting to fall for Peter, but I mean, she returned to the Ravagers, so I don't know. I mean, we're going to see Star-Lord eventually again, and you have to assume that we're going to see Gamora again. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens there. Drax is around. He's sort of got... He lost his child. That was what was driving him at the beginning of the trilogy. And now he's sort of got a whole new set of children. So, sort of his story came full circle, but did it? I don't know. He's still around. I mean, Dave Bautista has said that he does not want to come back to do Drax, but, I mean, Drax is still around, and so is Nebula, and they're on Nowhere, so is the story over, or is just James Gunn's part of this story over, you know? Like, is the ending of this trilogy just a send-off to James Gunn? And really, we're just going to continue on with these characters, which I would not have a problem with, because I love them. I mean, I think that's what I love best about this movie, is just, like, spending more time with all these characters. Because really, there was a lot going on in this film. And it didn't have, like, that feel-good kind of quality that the other two had, because there was just like this very dark element to it, which was like the High Evolutionary and all his sort of twisted machinations, which, hey, great, I'm all for that. We have a villain who's like horrible and he does horrible things, and it leaves me unsettled and I feel awful about it. Like everything that we saw that the High Evolutionary was responsible for was very much horrific. And I think that sort of cut the kind of that sort of lighthearted edge from this movie that the other two kind of had. Even though with Ego, like a lot of stuff was going on, and ultimately he was trying to kill everything in the universe. But you know, there was still kind of like this kind of whimsical aspect to the whole thing, like otherworldly, fun, playful. But in this, it was like very dark. It was like the High Evolutionary was a very dark figure, and then he like commits genocide, and he kills all of Earth 2's Counter Earth's population, which is very dark. The whole backstory with Rocket was very dark. It's interesting because like the way things have been set up, not just going into this film based on the trailers and any information we might have gotten, but also just kind of like things that James Gunn has said and like things that the actors have said. It sounded like, okay, so we're getting like a definitive end, and this could be very tragic. Like we're gonna lose some characters we love. Like things are gonna go in ways that are gonna bother us. But none of that happened. Really, I mean, it was a lot of teasing of that, right? Like you thought Drax was gonna die on that sort of organic laboratory place, which was very cool, by the way. He didn't die. I actually thought him and Mantis were going to die then. They didn't. Rocket was on the verge of dying the entire film and could have died when the High Evolutionary faced him at the end. Didn't happen. Peter almost died. Thought maybe that he would have died. He didn't die. So there was a lot of kind of that teasing. Like, oh, well, this is probably it. Like, I legitimately thought that Peter Quill was dead. And like that was it. Like they lost him, but he didn't. He came back, and that was kind of interesting. I don't know. It was like very much like a tease. Like this whole thing was very much a tease of like a tragic end to like the trilogy of the galaxy, of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and it wasn't that at all. It was just like another adventure that dealt with the backstory of one of the characters. Like the last one, it dealt with Peter's backstory. This one dealt with Rocket's backstory. So I'm thinking, okay, so we're moving forward. We have a new team. And maybe now we're going to delve into Groot, right? Because Groot kind of needs his backstory. We got Nebula's backstory. We got Gamora's backstory. We have Drax's backstory. You know, he lost his family, and that's why he was after Ronan, and that's why he was after Thanos. And, you know, that kind of played out. But we don't really know much about Groot. And like, when did Groot and Rocket meet? You know, and like, when did they become buddies? And like, how did Rocket become like this badass? Like, there's still a lot of story to be told there, and I have a feeling we're going to see it. So I'm excited about that. Now, the thing that really kind of was interesting to me was Adam Warlock. I liked that Adam Warlock was the sort of the kind of connection to the last film, the Sovereign, and like and sort of who they are, and it gave kind of an emotional weight to them, and also he connected them to the High Evolutionary, which I liked as well. I like how everything kind of connected ultimately, but as a reader of the comics from the time the Infinity Gauntlet was sort of running its course. Like I started reading like maybe a year or two before the Infinity Gauntlet, and I was reading Silver Surfer, and like Thanos had gotten the gems, and like all this stuff was going on. Adam Warlock was already in play at that point. He'd been around for a while prior to all of this, and he played a big role in Infinity Gauntlet, and then in the post-Infinity Gauntlet, where you basically had like Warlock and the Infinity Watch, where once they got the Infinity Gauntlet away from Thanos and they undid the snap, each of the Infinity Watch, which involved Gamora and Drax and Moondragon, which we haven't seen, and a few others, had, each of them carried one of the stones, and Adam Warlock had one of them, and it was like a whole thing. And Adam Warlock always seemed like a bigger character than what we got in the movie. Now this could very well be the beginning of Adam Warlock's story within the MCU. That makes sense. He's like extremely powerful. We saw that. But he was like a child, right? He's like a child of the Sovereign. Now he's essentially he's an orphan. So like he fits in with the Guardians. So it makes sense that he would become a Guardian. But it's not the Adam Warlock that we know from the comics. Now, do any characters have to be the characters we know from the comics? No. But nonetheless, it felt a little bit odd to kind of have him in there. I mean, clearly it was something that that was being built up by James Gunn, and so he did want it to play out. But did he need to be in this film? I don't know. Maybe. Was there like maybe too much going on in this movie? I mean, I guess you could argue that, but it did all tie in. It wasn't like it was just like a bunch of random things that were going on. It all came together, and there were like very, very clear-cut moments of like of intimacy between our guardians. You know, that despite the bigger story that was being told and the large sort of the context of everything going on, like, it was still about these characters that we love, and it was still about their bonds and them together. But then the character, like that family had expanded quite a bit, right? You also had Cosmo, you also had James Gunn's brother, you know, like there were like a bunch of people on Nowhere that seemed to matter. There were the Ravagers that seemed to matter. There was just a lot going on. I feel like I need to watch it again. I had to pee twice. I left once, and then I thought that would be it. And then I had to pee again towards the end. So I was like, you know, when you're like, you're getting close, you think you're getting close to the end, and you're like, okay, I can hold it. But then it turns out it's not the end of the movie, and you're like, oh, damn, but I don't want to leave because it's not the end of the movie. That means something else big is going to happen. So you're like holding your pee, and then that sort of filters your experience to an extent because you have like this sense of urgency, and somewhere in your mind you're thinking, okay, so the minute we're done, I got to get out of here and I go to the bathroom and just explode. So you know, I did have that going on. It could have been a little bit more comfortable. Maybe if I was more comfortable, like I would have just been a little less sort of, a little more kind of just like at peace with the magnitude and the length of what was going on. So we had the big sort of kind of explosive ending on Counter Earth, and then you thought, okay, that's over, but it wasn't over. You still have this whole other act. It felt like there were maybe like 4 acts in the film instead of 3, which is totally fine. Like, I like that James Gunn is willing to push the envelope, and I like that he's gotten to a point in his career, especially with Marvel, that they'll allow him to do that. I think if this was James Gunn, like Volume 1, like I think a lot would have been cut. Like there would have been a lot cut, a lot of the stuff maybe like with Cosmo and James Gunn's brother. I don't think that would have been in it at all. I think a lot of extra stuff would have been cut from this movie to make it a lot tighter. But even though it wasn't that, even though those things were in there, like it didn't feel superfluous. It just made the movie longer, but it didn't feel superfluous. And that's what's important. Like, you know, sometimes there's like a lot of shit that's extra and it just feels like it's there just to be there. And you feel like, well, why didn't they cut this? But when it comes to this movie and what James Gunn does, like, even though there's a lot going on, there's all these like sort of extraneous sort of threads that are kind of dangling, and also being like kind of, you know, raveled and ultimately tied up. It still feels like a unified sort of piece where everything sort of fits, despite all of it feeling kind of sort of like disjunctive in a sense, because there's so many different parts and there's so many things going on all over the place. But the fact that it does all come together and like it works is wonderful. I don't know. Did I absolutely 100% love this movie? Not as much as I love the first two. I have to say I really like the second one. I like the first one, but I really like the second one a lot. And then everything that happened post that with Infinity War, like all that stuff is awesome. So this does feel kind of like a natural kind of conversion to everything that's happened before. And so it felt right in that sense, as though like this is something that needed to happen. But still, like it didn't settle for me as like the best Guardians experience, but it did settle for me as a wonderful Guardians experience because I love these characters. And, you know, it's a continuation from the Christmas special. And like, I just want to keep seeing these characters, and I don't want them to die, and I want more of their story. So the more the merrier, you know. Definitely going to revisit this movie quite a bit. as the years go by. So I mean, it's not like I'm just going to turn my back on it. I didn't not like it. I liked it a lot. It's just I'm still processing it. There's so much to it. Maybe I'll go see it again next week or something. Give it like a week or two till things die down, and then I'll go watch it again and kind of reflect on it a little bit more. And actually just enjoy it for what it is, knowing what it is, knowing what's coming, knowing that I don't have to worry about like being heartbroken by the loss of some of my favorite characters. Maybe I'll just kind of be able to kind of just be immersed in the joy of this movie. A lot of people seem to love it though, so that's awesome. And again, like I did enjoy it quite a bit, and I will go back to it quite a bit. So again, like the story kind of continues from the Christmas special. We have Adam Warlock come in right at the very beginning. He hurts Rocket. We find out Rocket has like a proprietary failsafe that's going to cause him to die, which is ultimately the MacGuffin of the film. It's the thing that's sort of driving the story. We got to save Rocket, and then that ultimately gets us to that organic sort of factory, which was hilarious. I love the production design of that place. I thought it was beautiful. I thought all the scenes in that place were gorgeous. A lot of comedy in there, a lot of comedy throughout with Mantis and Drax, which I love Mantis and Drax in Guardians 2, in the Christmas special, in Infinity War, and now in this movie. I love them. They're so freaking hilarious together. We got a lot of that, and I loved it. We got a lot of funny bits. We got a lot of sort of that kind of desire by Peter to want Gamora back, and her kind of not giving a crap about him. Really enjoyed that dynamic. The Nebula element, just love Nebula. Like the evolution of her character is wonderful. She's like this very twisted, wonderful like entity now. Like she cares, but she's horrible at the same time. It's wonderful. There's so much complexity in the characters, and like that's what you want, right? Because this is about these characters. So as long as that's going on, despite like the craziness of the story and all the stuff going on, it's like you still get these wonderful characters, these wonderful character moments, and it's fantastic. So enjoyed everything that went on in that place. Love the whole shtick with Peter and that sort of the kind of the scientists who he was trying to seduce, and like that dynamic with Gamora, and sort of like ultimately him like showing Gamora, yeah, like I'm hot shit. Just kind of trying to slowly build up that relationship again. Never quite getting there, but pieces of that puzzle kind of coming together. So it didn't quite get there, which I kind of wanted, but I'm glad it didn't happen. But I kind of wanted, but I'm glad it didn't happen. But I like that it was still kind of teasing us. Well, maybe this could happen. I guess the idea that like this would be the last one sort of made me feel like, well, it has to happen here. But if it's not the last one, and they said the legendary Star-Lord will return, that means that it could happen later. So, and Gamora, Zoe Saldana has not said anything about not wanting to return or anything, or not returning at all. I know that she did make some comments about, her feeling like, doing these like very big budget, like CGI heavy films like Avatar and these has limited her like acting range as far as like the parts she gets or whatever. So maybe we'll see her step away for a while, but I don't not necessarily not see her coming back at some point, especially if we're going to talk about Secret Wars eventually. So we'll see what happens there. Anyway, so we went from that factory to Counter-Earth, right? So like the whole first part of the movie felt like the first act. The part of that factory felt like the second act. Counter-Earth felt like the third act, and then everything that happened post Counter-Earth with the High Evolutionary in the ship and all that felt like the fourth act. And then even the epilogue felt like a fifth act. So there was like a lot going on. But the Counter-Earth thing was interesting. We saw some of the stuff in the trailer. But like the idea that, he was the High Evolutionary was creating this world that was sort of modeled after Earth, but you know, he was trying to kind of extract like all the awful parts of it. But in the process, he was being a monster. Was interesting, you know, and then ultimately the idea that these creatures and these entities that he was creating were not able to create on their own, and it was that ability to be creative, to create, that truly made the entities successful in his mind. And Rocket Raccoon was the only one that had ever achieved that. And so that was his motivation for wanting to get him back, hoping to perfect these species that would ultimately perfect the perfect society, which is what he was trying to achieve. And ultimately, I guess, create harmony in the universe, but he was a monster. So, I mean, there's always that whole thing, right? Where it's like, you know, these villains are trying to, in their minds, do good, but in the process, they're being just awful, 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 awful creatures. So, I don't know. It was an interesting thing that went on, and everything, again, like everything that went on with him and like the aspect of his story was very, very dark. And even like these very cool looking kind of monstrous soldiers that he had were kind of like half animal, half android, were grotesque. And that, like, a lot of what was going on in these labs was grotesque. And it was just very dark. I mean, James Gunn is very good about kind of balancing everything, but he does have a horror background. So you know that like that's where he's coming from with this stuff. So, but it's also supposed to like be geared towards children, right? So I think that's why we got all those children at the end. And there's always a lot of that comedy because it kind of cuts the edge off of like the horror, which is in this movie very pronounced, much more so than again in the prior films. Like there's a very clear-cut dark element of horror in this film, which as a horror fan I love, but again it was like very kind of it felt like a different direction for these characters and these films, which is great because you don't want the same thing over and over again. So I do like that aspect of it. As I'm talking more and more, I'm enjoying it more. I think I enjoyed it more than I just needed a moment to kind of let it settle and like kind of work through it. But I did enjoy the film quite a bit. I'm enjoying the things I'm thinking about more and more. I want to see it again now, just like thinking about it again, which is awesome. It's a James Gunn film, for God's sake. The guy's an auteur filmmaker. He's a true voice in cinema, and I love him, and I love what he's done. And this is just another sample of that, which is just wonderful. I mean, Jesus Christ, James Gunn is a gift, straight up, a gift, and I very much appreciate him and what he's done here. And then like the whole thing on Counter Earth turned to genocide, which was very dark, and then everything going on in that ship was very dark. He was just such a dark character. It's very unsettling. Whenever like you think about like experimentation of living things and like suffering and sort of the grotesque results of that is always kind of unsettling for me, no matter what the context is. So yeah, like that element of horror has always, like, body horror has never been like my favorite type of horror because it always leaves like this icky feeling for me. And there's definitely a lot of body horror in this film, even though a lot of the bodies were animals. But you know, the way it played out, they were sentient animals. Like even these like adorable creatures that were Rocket's friends as he was growing up were horrific. You know, like his friend, the lemur. The female lemur, Lila, like she had like robotic arms, and then you had that walrus that like was half like a chariot or something, and then you had that bunny that was like a spider, like adorable but grotesque. That whole thing with Rocket and his backstory, it was touching, but it was very dark, and like I don't know, it's a great element to this movie. This like very kind of mixed like adorable / dark aspect. I think that very much sets this movie apart from probably all of the Marvel films. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was very dark as well. So it did have an element of that, but it was a very different type of element because that was just more like dark arts and like the dark forces of nature versus like, you know, the dark forces of like the laboratory and what that could accomplish. So very different sort of dark paths, but paths that are dark that are being walked nonetheless in this fourth and fifth phase of the MCU in this multiverse saga. So interesting stuff. And then we went from Counter Earth to the ship, and then we had the development that the children were discovered, and then we had this really incredible action sequence in that hallway, which I thought was like James Gunn just like kind of letting loose as a filmmaker. He's like, I'm gonna do a continuous take action sequence in a hallway with all sorts of characters and different enemies being fought and like crazy action moves and like different angle. It's just like film candy, baby. Like that's what you want from a true filmmaker, like who has all the power of Hollywood behind him, who's willing to support him and his artistic vision. Like you want you want a filmmaker to let loose like that, where you get to plan a sequence like that. Let me tell you, a sequence like that takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of time to execute. So the fact that they let him do it is a very unique and special thing. Not many people in this world have the privilege to be able to be backed with the resources to be able to execute something like that. So I look forward to seeing that sequence again and again. I was already sort of at the point when it started of like, oh God, I gotta pee, but now there's like another actor. So I was enjoying it, but I was also like kind of like, I gotta pee. I should have just gone to pee. Damn. I hate missing stuff though, but I got to do it next time. I can't allow this to kind of mar my perspective on things. But then again, that's what repeat viewings are for. And this movie ain't going nowhere. It'll be in the theater for a while. I've got AMC A-list, so I can go watch it as many times as I want. And I think I'll watch it 1 or 2 more times in the theater because why the hell not? So I'll definitely be doing that. Definitely be enjoying that sequence again. I enjoyed everything that was going on in the ship. Did I like that Rocket left the High Evolutionary alive? No. The High Evolutionary is a monster. You should have killed him. But, I mean, did he die? We didn't see him die, so maybe he's still alive. The High Evolutionary has always been around in the Marvel Universe. He played a role in the dynamic between Quicksilver, Wanda, and Magneto. That was not talked about in this movie, but maybe there's a connection there. Because clearly he's been to Earth. So what part has he played on Earth? You know, like, did he have something to do with mutation? You know, like, we'll see. You know, like, is his story over? I don't know. Hopefully it is because he's a monster, but also hopefully not, because always nice to have great villains running around, because that's the whole point of having heroes. You need villains that need to be stopped. So we'll see what happens there. It's possible he's still alive, but my goodness, he was grotesque, especially when his face was taken off. His face was awful, and Rocket did that to him. And what we saw was like, that was another part of it where it was just like, whoa, like what I'm seeing here, this face that he has under that skin, like this is very much a horror movie element. And like kids are gonna watch this movie, like it's gonna screw with them, but you know, kids need to see some horrible shit every now and then. You know, there's this horrible shit in the world. Might as well get a little taste of it every now and then. Sprinkle within the context of a lovely, very sort of whimsical milieu, like that of the Guardians films. But yeah, that was just mind-blowing. The whole thing with Adam Warlock, his mom being killed, I thought that he would come back and he would be the one that would kill the High Evolutionary, but it wasn't him. And he kept being an adversary until he saw Groot help him. And then that sort of changed him. And I do enjoy that he had that little bit of a sort of growth that could lead him to be a hero, maybe a great force in the Marvel Universe. We'll see. Definitely an interesting element, Adam Warlock, but again, felt like a little bit like much, but also fitting. So there's that whole thing. So we had the escape from the ship, we had the ship blow up, and then we get the whole epilogue where it felt very, this is the end, but it's not the end, but it is the end, but it's not the end, but it is the end, but it's not the end. It's like, well, which one is it? Is it the end or is it not the end? I'm happy it's not the end, but is it the end? Because you keep pretending it's the end, but it's not the end, but it is the end, but it's not the end, but it is. Okay, so which one is it? I don't know, but whatever. Everybody's still alive. Everybody's doing their thing. Mantis went away. Peter went back to Earth. Folks stayed on Nowhere. Some became Guardians. Guardians still exist. I don't know. It's weird. I guess what's weird is just like, it's weird, I guess, when you have these movies and they're not part of a clear-cut saga. You don't quite. It's an odd thing having been used to that with these movies. The first two being both like parts of the Infinity Saga. You know, definitely the first one set off quite a bit, right? Like that's really what we started finding out about the Infinity Stones and like what Thanos was after. You know, we saw him at the end of Avengers, but like that Guardians 1 was when we truly saw him, where he became a character and we started to understand his motivation. We learned about the Infinity Stone. So the first Guardians was very much about that. The second Guardians was more a story about the characters and more about Peter's backstory. But it also was somewhat of a bridge to the Infinity War. And we did get Infinity War like right afterwards. So it did sort of feel like part of that. This feels just more like a Guardians of the Galaxy story, which I'm totally fine with. But it does, I guess that's part of like, of where like it felt different, you know, because it wasn't part of that. But maybe it was, you know, maybe there were pieces being put into place that are going to lead us into the bigger saga, which has yet to be told, right? The multiverse saga, the seeds have been laid. We're in the second act of it. I have a feeling this is where things are going to start to converge, and we're really going to start to see like the plan they have and like how everything's supposed to come together. So I look forward to seeing what's next. I look forward to seeing more of these characters. It's sad to know that James Gunn is not going to be a part of this anymore, but it's nice to know that the DC universe is now in the good hands of James Gunn. And so he'll be able to hopefully like turn that ship around, you know. I'm very much looking forward to The Flash though. My goodness. Hold your horses on that one. I'll be coming back to talk about that one when that one comes out. Boy, oh boy. You know what I'm saying? Boy, oh boy. So that one's coming up, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'm looking forward to more, man. Like that's the best part about this. Even though this movie wasn't necessarily like part of like a bigger saga in a sense, it always is because it's all part of the Marvel universe, which is awesome. And so, I mean, I love it. I love it so much, and like I just can't wait to see where it all goes. And if there was a new Marvel movie every day, I would go watch a new Marvel movie every day because I fucking love this shit. Anyway, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Thank you for checking out my video. If you haven't already subscribed, click that subscribe button. Click that like button. Leave a comment. Or don't do any of those things. I don't care. I just like to talk about the shit I love because why the hell not? I've got a channel. I've been around for almost, I think, 10 years now, which is crazy. And I'll be around for hopefully a couple more decades before I say goodbye forever. But these videos will always exist for people to enjoy if they choose to. I enjoy talking about it for sure because I enjoy watching these movies and I enjoy this stuff a lot. Anyway, I hope all of you are doing as well as you possibly can. And as always, I want to remind you that if you haven't already, you better put an X in the box because ain't nobody checking me, folks. Ain't nobody checking